Alrighty, welcome, welcome, welcome. So the topic of cross culture, I think, is quite an interesting one. I wanted to bring it back to something that the very inspirational Bianca said earlier. She's kind of the epitome of someone who's singularly focused on one thing, right? Like someone who's pushing through, pioneering as a driver in a space. But she said it's really important to her to have her music, her anime. As humans, we're inherently very multicultural. You know, we love lots of different things. Not as easy for brands to do the same. You know, so we've got to think of our customers, but playing in lots of spaces isn't as easy. So as an introductory question, I'd love you to talk about each of your roles and what spaces of culture, very quickly, that your brand plays into. Ed, go first.
Oh, sure. It's great to be talking about this topic of culture and branding with Coca-Cola on the stage. I mean, Coca-Cola's got to be one of the most ultimate brands that leverages pop culture to its business. So I'm also interested to hear what Teejae is going to say. I think at Cathay, we aspire to be a cultural brand. I'm not, to be, in all honesty, I'm not sure we're there yet. I mean, I welcome everyone's views, but because to me, I think culture is about the way people live. It's the way they go about doing things. And I think when you think about creativity and technology, your mind goes to Apple. If you think about kind of dining or good times with friends, you very often end up with Coca-Cola. You know, I think brands that are really, really powerful and they've got such a momentum behind them of demand, it's really because they've tapped into culture the way that they live. So at Cathay, what we do to try and be more than just, a bus with wings that gets you from A to B, don't quote me on that, right? We're trying to be a lot more. But it's about when you think of doing something, is Cathay part of that memory? Is it part of that passion point? So that's why we do a lot in sport, and do with not just the famous people in sport, but the up and comers. So we can be part of the culture of the families with kids in sport. So we're part of that whole journey. And then recently we've also been working in arts and dining and things like that, realizing that the world is more than sport. But there's so many ways in which that inspire people to travel, or their travel experience has something to do with something else that you buy or something else you go and see. So for us, it's just having that awareness that those things go together, and we try and position ourselves in that space.
I love that. I'm going to come back to dig into a few of those points in a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Teejae, just very briefly, talk us through your role and then some of the cultural connections that Coca-Cola makes.
So yeah, I take care of Coca-Cola for this vibrant region of ASEAN and South Pacific. The job is of the 60 to 70 beverages that a person drinks once a week. I mean, hopefully one of them is a Coke or a Coke Zero. And for that to happen, we need to be part of their lives, not just in a functional way, but also in a meaningful way, right? So as a brand, we've always been about optimism and bridging divides. So certain passion points that are naturally fitting to that would be music, being a universal language, meals, because in many cultures it's such a communal activity as well, the recent Olympics, World Cup, among others. So those are the passions that we kind of tap into.
Lovely. Ed, I'm going to come back to you. We'll dig into some of the themes that you just spoke about in a minute, but I thought if you could give us an example of something that Cathay does that taps into culture, maybe a partnership or a campaign that you've worked on, just to give us a little example of what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. I think probably one of the aspects of culture that we're probably most famous for would be that rugby sevens and that whole thing. I mean, to go back to it being a way of life. And actually, Michael Denmark, who was up here before, his son is actually playing with the Hong Kong rugby team. Max Denmark, he's a great player. But now my son is playing, and it's just interesting when you're in that community, it's a way of life. And then you realize that there's all these things that go along with that way of life that requires you to make brand choices. So if you can be a part of that movement, then you get to be part of the solution. People who need to travel to a sporting event, or it's an event in Hong Kong, or it's a regional tournament. Who would you want to travel with? So the sponsorship that we have for Rugby Sevens is one of those ones. It's very interesting. I mean, you guys may know, but the whole Rugby Sevens sponsorship for us started in 1976, I think it was. Cathay was the first brand ever to sponsor any rugby tournament anywhere in the world, before World Cups, believe it or not. And the reason why it happened was because at that stage, it was all the expats and the Brits who wanted to have that rugby way of life in Hong Kong. They needed companies to help them make it happen. So that was where that started. And if you go through to today, what's interesting about it is how it's evolved from being just watching sport to now it's become almost like a cosplay event in Hong Kong. For anyone who has been to rugby sevens, I mean, there's an old saying, when you get bored, you can always turn around and watch the rugby, right? Because really what's going on is people come dressed in all kinds of things, and it's become, people are enjoying the event as a way to kind of hang out with friends. And it's just, I think the rugby just legitimizes part of it. Anyway, so it's about understanding, I think for us, the way that people live. And that's certainly one of our most famous ones. And then the beauty of that is that when you think about why you travel, like traveling to World Cup rugby or a tennis match or something, it's often because you're very motivated to be part of that experience. So I think that's what partnerships are, or what culture does. It gives you a way to leverage a passion point that people have. Because I don't think people are passionate about Cathay Pacific. I mean, hopefully we're a premium good quality airline. People may be passionate about Coca-Cola, but I don't know that we go that far. But that's why, even for like MasterCard, I mean, at the end of the day, you just want to be adjacent to or part of the enabling, I think, entity that makes it happen. And therefore, maybe in the deep recesses of your mind, you become part of that memory, part of that passion point.
I actually didn't realise the history of that connection to rugby. I did associate with that event, but that's fascinating. I want to dig into actually this point because, perhaps people don't connect with the Cathay brand on that kind of level, but I think you do, to your point, the travel and cultural element is intrinsic. So I think being able to play in that is a natural space for Cathay. Can you elaborate a little bit more about kind of how travel as a broader category plays in with culture and then the space that you kind of have for your brand?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually even launched a new business division to try and actually make money from all of these things. So it's called Cathay Lifestyle. Because what we realized is that when you travel, if you think about, what you do, even for business or leisure, same thing, it very often involves kind of, hotel choices. But then it also involves dining or, even leisure, where you're combining some formal travel reason with some kind of shopping or retail. And then very often, people are traveling around the world to go and see a show, whether it's in New York or London. So these are some of the other partnerships we're having, like, for example, at the West End. London's West End. So we're now sponsored the Lloyd Webber Theatre Group. So that's now sponsored with Cathay. That's part of us realizing that that's a big reason why you would want to go to London, or certainly people from Asia, major travellers to London. Also in Hong Kong, of course, we have the M Plus and the West Kowloon Theatre Group. The Arts Precinct. This is a world-class arts facility that by realizing that that's another reason to come to Hong Kong beyond a meeting or the rugby sevens. That's another reason. So that's another thing that we're doing. And then we have a whole series of kind of dining partnerships, and we partner with a lot of restaurants, realizing that's part of, that's the joy of travel. So it's what we're trying to do is to understand you've got the backbone of travel is A to B, but adjacent and all around it is all these other kind of soft areas, but they're definitely a part of the whole travel lifestyle, as we say. And we're trying to kind of have part of our brand attached with all of those things and wrap it all up under Cathay.
It's interesting, yeah, because I think this panel, if I think about the topic, is about connecting things that seem very different, sports or music and things like that, but actually travel is just the connective tissue to all of those things. Yeah. Creates that space for you to actually play across all of them. The other thing that I wanted to tap into, which is sort of arguably a connective tissue on this, is data. And maybe another angle that airlines have a kind of space in, because you have loyalty schemes and you know your customers relatively well, or those customers. Do you use your data to kind of look at culture? How does that kind of information about your customer play into decisions around culture?
It may sound a little bit scary, but we don't kind of secretly build kind of intelligence files on each and every member. That does sound a bit like Big Brother. So, but I mean, quite seriously, it is a topic for us when we think about first-party marketing, that is the nirvana, right? Is that, and we've been talking about this for years, it feels like 20 years we've been talking about first-party data marketing, but actually I find it's actually a lot harder to do in reality than what it says on the tin. Welcome everyone's advice about how to do it better, but what we find is that it's quite hard to find out what people are interested in unless they directly tell you. Like, so for example, people who fly to Japan to go skiing doesn't mean they want to go skiing every year. It's quite hard to make that very reliable. There's a lot of variability in what people do. So actually, in reality, what works quite well for us is actually working with second and third party data or partners to try and create cohorts. And we have created a segmentation model, which is quite sophisticated in bringing together different data sources to give us an idea of what people are interested in. But quite honestly, we've done quite a bit to try and predict what people are interested in, and then we send an offer targeted to that individual. But we don't find that we perform much more than average in terms of that. I think because human beings are so complicated, I think it's very hard, honestly, to predict what people are going to do. So the other way is kind of the old-fashioned way of just do a really good job of trying to make something interesting, and then the people who are interested will find their way to you, rather than directly go to you and say, I know what you want, and here's your offer. So,
I was actually going to introduce your example, Teejae, by saying it might be quite different to what Ed's saying, but actually I think this does connect to what you're just saying. Can you talk us through an example? We all know, as you said earlier, Coca-Cola connects to culture. No shock there. So can you talk us through a specific example so we can learn a bit more?
Yeah. I actually thought about what I'd bring today, right? Because we have several platforms like the Olympics or Coke Studio with music. But I actually want to talk about something that's not usually talked about, which is Coke and meals, right? We've been doing it for 100 years. Yeah. But if we want to attract, Gen Z or new generations of consumers, we need to make it contemporary. People that don't just consume, food and Coke for functional reasons now. And food is not just there for nourishment, it's a passion in itself. So how do we make Coke and meals sexy? So just as a business background, there were two opportunities that we identified. One is post-pandemic, young people actually want to go out and reconnect with friends and discover new things, right? And within this group of friends, there's always one that is what we call the moment maker, or the one who kind of researches and then takes his or her their friends along. On the other hand, there's also a business issue with our partners because not a lot of people are coming back to eating out post-pandemic. So how do we get people excited about discovering things and eating out? And that's where Food Marks came in. As a global platform, it was meant to celebrate the connection between Coke, food, and the iconic moments. So kind of like nostalgia, looking for that Hollywood moment to dramatize the magic of sharing a Coke with your meals. But here in Southeast Asia, and even in Australia and New Zealand, we don't have a lot of those Hollywood moments like Marilyn Monroe eating a hot dog stand in New York with a Coke, right? But what we do have are local gems, especially in Southeast Asia, street food, right? So how do we make people want to search for this street food? What kind of intersections can we identify? So we said, okay, street food, street culture. Within street culture, there's music, right? Hip hop. So food and hip hop is not a usual combination. And as we were working through this, we also wanted to work with partners, right? People discover food not to TV anymore, but restaurants through, social media. So we need to work with them, and we need to work with partners as well. It's kind of a multidisciplinary intersection, or maybe I've actually prepared a 2-minute video for people to see and appreciate the interaction, its impact to the business, because after all, what's a marketing outing without a video? So maybe if we could play that and then I can talk more about it.
Every night out, street food boxing. This is how we living, sipping, eating, cooking, file in the kitchen, walk it, cook it, walk it, sip it, drink it, Coca-Cola. Night out, all my enjoy ด้วยกันเพื่อน Night out, ยกโค้กขึ้น celebrate เพื่อน Night out, ผัดไทยต้มยำเยี่ย Night out, มาล่าหมูกระทะเยี่ย Night out, ถ้าเราพร้อมแล้วก็ลุยกันเลยเพื่อน Let's go เตรียมชุดให้พร้อมนัดเลยไม่มีเลือดเปิดที่หมูสับเตะออเดิร์ฟเจ้าเด็ดรับรองกระโดดขึ้นรถตุกตุกมุ่งหน้าไปบรรทัดทองลองกินยำแซลมอนก็แซ่บแบบว่าเกินพันนาหรือจะกินข้าวผัดกระเพราถนน30กันยาแล้ววกกลับเข้ามากินข้าวมันไก่หน่อยเพื่อนบอกก๋วยเตี๋ยวต้มยำนี่แหละที่วิ่งใส่บ่อยของอร่อยในวิญญาณจะกินรสช่องแบบชิมลางข้าวซอยไก่นิมมันข้าวเหนียวหมูปิ้งข้างริมทางลูกชิ้นปิ้งชิมดูมะม่วงสุกใส่บิงซูหรือลองข้าวผัดปูและไปต่อชาบูโอ้โหก๋วยเตี๋ยวเรือก๋วยจับน้ำใสไปต่อถนนสันเจ้ากินลงโต้งกันใหม่อาหารอร่อยกับโคกเย็นๆพบเจอผู้คนไหลๆ BKK เอปิกไหนเอาไม่ว่าจะเป็นวันไหนบิ๊กกันให้ยับเด้ Walk it cheer cook it cheer Coca-Cola cheer drink it cheer Walk it cheer cook it cheer Coca-Cola cheer drink it cheer Walk it cook it
Ooh, this is fire, bro.
Bigกันให้ยับเด้ Walk it cheer cook it cheer Coca-Cola cheer drink it cheer Walk it cheer cook it cheer Coca-Cola cheer drink it cheer Walk it Coca-Cola drink it Epic night out
Whoa.
Yeah.
So good.
And it delivered business metrics as well, right? Sales, digital attachment, even new enrollments of outlets with our partners. It helped their business as well. So not only did their offline sales grow, they also created a new revenue stream for them. So it's a win-win situation for everybody that we're scaling up as we speak. So that was one epicenter in Bantatong. Now we'll end the year with about 40 of those food mark epicenters all across ASP.
Amazing. I actually want one of the necklaces if there's any left. What I wanted to dig into on that was, obviously this came from a global platform, like an idea, sort of Coca-Cola Global. I'm sure there's lots of brands in the room that have the situation where Global goes, here's a platform, make it APAC.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of figure out how to localize it, which is so connected to this culture topic. How did you do that and what challenges did you come up to?
As mentioned, the global platform was around recreating an iconic moment. And we did try to seek for those iconic Hollywood moments, but it was just difficult to do so. But what we do know in our markets is street food. Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, we're all part of this local gem. So instead of looking back, we want to look at the present and move forward to get more people to discover these local gems that we had. So our model was different in a sense that it wasn't about recreating a moment, but creating our own moment, creating our own pop culture moment through music in Thailand, through partnership with Netflix in Philippines, because obviously, there's a slight variation and freedom that we gave in the market, but the framework is the same. Identify food clusters and epicenters, create an actual mark, and then, the toolkit is the same. And we had stronger integrations with commercial teams, with Grab as a partnership. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, the global team was in Bangkok. They got to see this and they said, okay, we liked how you did this. We want to do this in other places in the world as well. So I think, collaboration, making sure everyone is involved is really important. And obviously, you deliver results, you pivot and you share and you scale as fast as you can. I think the culture of experimentation is very, very strong in our organization, and that allows us to try different things in different places, have some things fixed, but many things also flex. And that will make us really culturally relevant. Because our world is global, yes, you can find information, but one thing that the pandemic also did is people falling in love again and appreciating what is local. So we need to find a balance of both.
Absolutely. I also love that the global team have seen that and now they're kind of taking learnings from this version of it to kind of go backwards. That's great. I've got a little bonus question on this because you obviously had quite different talents kind of involved in it. You had a hip-hop artist, you had a chef. How do you manage such varied talents? I mean, that's a core component of culture, right? You working with, borrowing culture from these people who live and breathe it. How do you manage that?
That's true. I mean, Chef Pom obviously wanted to promote Thai cuisine. So we leverage on our expertise to identify and vet some of these epicenters, right? F-Hero, who is like the king of hip-hop collabs in Thailand, who loves food as well, and having Coke. We had to work with him. It's funny that you say that because his first draft of the song sounded like a jingle. And we were like, we have to explain to him. And there's even arguments even within the team, right? Some people say, we need to add more branding and even making an input in the actual verses of the song. And when I saw those email exchanges, I was like, oh, please, let's not be that client. So I immediately called my creative strategy director, and this is what we should explain to F-Hero. This is about him and his love for, there's a reason why we chose him. He loves Thai food. He loves drinking it with Coke. So it's about him. Where does he go? What kind of activities does he do with his crew? And just talk about his love for Thai food and Coke together. There are only a few mandatories. One is he needs to mention Ban Pat Tong because that's the street where the epicenter is. And in his own way, put Coke in the pivotal moment of the song. So there are guardrails, but we set it free. And the result was that, and it felt authentic to him. He was also surprised. It's like, I didn't know this was supposed to be about me. But yeah, it's about you. And it felt authentic to him and his fans and the people of Thailand. So, yeah.
Sounds like you're a good client to be briefed
I hope
by.
so.
I've got another question that's connected to your piece of work, but I think Ed would have a good opinion on this. So in your piece of work, you showed that it connected to kind of e-commerce, and you had elements of it that were kind of very much performance-driven on sales. Earlier on in one of the previous panels, we were talking about the kind of long-term and short-term element of being a marketer. The tenure of marketers tends to be, as we heard earlier, well, CMOs are 4 years. As it gets more junior, I think it's even less than that. You're both sitting here as marketers who have been at your brands for quite a bit longer than that. So I'm interested to hear your opinion on that topic from earlier, how to balance the short-term and the long-term of it, and how important you see both of those pools. I'll start with you because that connects to that, and then we'll come to Ed.
I mean, yeah, both are important. Like, we shouldn't do things because it's fun. We need to have a clear line of sight. Everything should lead to a transaction immediately or eventually, right? So obviously there's a lot of data involved in terms of using that and making your pitch. But I think both are important, right? You need the immediate gains. You need to be clear about what the KPIs are and how you will measure it. And then when you can measure it, socialize it immediately. Because that's how the traction began, right? When they saw Thailand doing well, Vietnam said, I can do that too. Philippines said, nah, I can do better. So it then, feeds into this innovation and building with each other and experimenting and scaling. And by the way, Joy, who was our lead of experimentation at scale, is here as well. We love doing this. So you need to be clear about the short-term KPIs and the long-term KPIs. Because at the end of the day, what our realization is in the pandemic, because we did pause marketing activities for a number of months during the pandemic, it's the long-term equity that will give people the reason to choose you. So you need to build both. But we do need to deliver the business, so there has to be a balance of both short-term metrics and long-term metrics as well.
I'd love to hear your opinion on the same.
Yeah, I think Coke, probably Nike, Coke, Apple. I mean, there are a few of the brands that do it the best in the world. And I think what happened, in my opinion, the business health of those brands is because each day they reap the dividend of many, many years of consistent investment in culture. So what happens, I mean, we all probably know this, but I think, when you build a strong association with dining, if you go in and dine, then it becomes a bit Pavlovian, right? You order a meal and then you think about what goes with the meal. Then maybe you want to order a Coke. So non-paid for trigger points become a trigger point for your consumption. That's why cultural branding is the nirvana of branding. It's the best, most powerful economic strategy, I think, for how marketing can really drive business, because it does it every minute of the day, and you don't have to be there, kind of pushing it. The opposite is where you have no cultural connection, and then the only trigger to buy is a discount. And then for brands like that, you're just circling the drain, or you're just eroding your yield, because the only reason someone's going to buy you is because it looks like you're cheaper this week than you will be next week. So, but that's the far ends of the spectrum, I think. And so, I think for, coming back to Cathay is we're trying to be a brand that, again, that goes above and beyond just the base function, to be a part of a lifestyle. So when you do think about something, a motivation to go, a reason, music, or something like that, then we are in the back reaches of your mind. We're part of how that works as well. So I think going back to the conversation and the last panel, I think that why marketing is important. I think that Milton Friedman quote about it's all about revenue, of course it's all about revenue. It's just that since his times in the 20s, I think, was it Friedman? I think he was in the 20s. Since then, what's happened is with investment funds and everything, it's become the requirement for company performance has become, show me the return on investment this year, or sometimes it's this quarter. So then that can actually drive strategy for a lot of people who can't get above and beyond the reporting cycle. But I think I don't think that Friedman was wrong. When it comes to cultural branding, as I said, it just becomes long-term revenue return, short-term and long-term. It's both. But I think that what marketers have to do, to go back to the previous panel, is that marketers have to be articulate in how to explain, measure, and report and socialize internally that when you do great marketing, you can see the short-term, medium, and the long-term return. But you have to be prepared to do the work. I mean, you need to do the econometric models to show that actually a lot of your sales is coming from just association with dining, right, for Coke. But there's no kind of campaign you're doing today that would necessarily show that. So don't look for that to be true just right now. It's, you need to have the right measurement approach. And I think at Cathay that's where we are, is that you need to build the portfolio of instruments to tell the story that you need to tell. But if you're not going to tell the long-term story, then people can't be blamed by saying, well, what have you done for me lately?
I think you also make a good point about consistency, right? So I've been in this role almost 4 years. The key pillars that we have been the same the last 4 years. We did play around with technology and tools to inform how we deliver those messages, or the technology and the tools and the platforms help us deliver those messages, but the messages were consistent. And if you want to be a cultural brand, you can't change what you stand for year on year. Like, you have to be consistent with, what you want to stand for in the lives of people.
That may be an interesting way to cap this off, because, so with what Nike's been doing, I think cultural branding, as I said, I think is the greatest ROI out there. But it does come with some cautionary words. There's culture wars going on, and I think in some markets around the world, you can easily get on the wrong side of a culture war and find out you've lost 30% of your business, like in a week. So I think we've all seen, I think, some of those brands that have had those instances. So I think it's to me, it's like it's the ninjutsu of marketing. You've got to be at that level. You want to be associated with a way of life, but some people out there might not like that way of life. That might mean that you win with that group, but you lose with another group. So I do think you do need to go into it kind of in a careful way. But as Teejae says, if it's genuine and authentic, yes, you have to be consistent. You can't be like, I'm standing for this today and for that tomorrow, because it takes time to build up, right? So we're, at Cathay, we've been doing a lot of sports for a long time because, quite honestly, probably because our senior management were quite into sport. But then I think increasingly, right, if we take a more professional view of marketing, we're going to be into arts and culture, because that's what we see our audiences into. But that will take time. We don't expect for us to build that mental association overnight. Honestly, it's a 5-10 year kind of thing.
Absolutely. And that's nice to hear. Proper investment, authentic, and across different cultures, representing what humans really do. Thank you so much. We've literally just run out of time. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.